Mortal Kombat 4, a title that promised to usher this legendary franchise into a bold new era of 3D combat, cutting-edge graphics, and evolutionary gameplay. The game where spine-ripping sorcery and blood-drenched brawling made the leap from glorious digitised gore into the brave new world of polygonal regret. In today's episode, we're taking a deep, long-suffering look at Mortal Kombat 4, Midway's infamous first attempt to drag their beloved bucket of fatalities into the third dimension. A game so desperate to appear modern, it seemed to lose half of its soul somewhere between the loading screen and the awkward voice acting. Critics nodded politely, fans smiled through gritted teeth, and Ed Boon, he probably cried into his joystick. But here's the twist. Despite everything, it kind of worked, financially at least. Like a paper bag full of money drifting downstream, ugly, crumpled, but undeniably moving. So with all of this in mind, what exactly went wrong, and what, if anything, actually went right? Join me today as we explore not just the tale of a questionable game, but a story of ambition outpacing ability, of a franchise at a crossroads, marching face first into a lamppost. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the story of Mortal Kombat 4, the disaster that was waiting to happen. Yeah. The fighting game genre, home to uppercuts, fireballs, and some of the most wonderfully unhinged history in gaming. And in true chaotic fashion, Capcom has finally decided to crack open the vault and give fans what they've been screaming for. 8 cult classic brawlers bundled together in one beautiful blood-stained package. Capcom Fighting Collection 2, which includes the likes of the Capcom vs SNK games, Power Stone titles, Rival Schools 2, Project Justice, and so much more. And yes, you can grab it right now for 25% off using my link below. Not enough? Try 74% off Street Fighter 6 with Season 1 and 2 passes sliced in half. Or grab Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, or Expedition 33, both at 43% off. Get up to 90% off of thousands of titles now. Hit the link, grab some bargains, and enjoy the rest of this video. Mortal Kombat 4, the moment Midway gazed into the bold polygonal future and tripped over its own testicles of might. This was supposed to be Mortal Kombat's grand leap into 3D. A fresh start, a modernisation, a glorious new chapter, and yet what we got was pretty underwhelming. By the late 90s, the arcade scene wasn't just on life support, it had flatlined, being resurrected by a necromancer, and then exploded into a fine mist of debt and redundancy. The golden age was over, no more cigarette-scented cabinets, no more sticky floors echoing with Street Fighter 2 themes, just landlords slowly realising they could make more money renting space to kebab shops. But Midway would chug along in the arcades, trying their very best to survive. Before Mortal Kombat 4 took its first clumsy steps into the world of 3D fighting, there was War Gods, Midway's unfortunate attempt at proving they could, in fact, render a third dimension without everything immediately falling apart. Spoiler, they couldn't. Released in 1996, War Gods was supposed to be Midway's Virtua Fighter moment, a showcase of polygonal prowess, and proved that the studio wasn't just coasting on fatalities and nostalgia. Instead, what we got was a slow, ugly, wildly awkward mess that played like someone just jammed Mortal Kombat 3 into a toaster and hoped for the best. The game's key innovation, if you can call it that, was a cursed little gimmick called digital skin. In theory, this involved mapping photos of real actors onto 3D models, which sounds impressive until you see it in motion and realise every character looked like a melted wax sculpture of their own stunt double. Limbs wobbled, faces flickered, animations stuttered like a haunted animatronic. And let's not even get started on the art design, which ranged from S&M action figure to reject from a Tool music video. Gameplay-wise, War Gods introduced the infamous 3D button, which allowed players to sidestep very, very slowly. The fatalities were still there, bless them, but good luck triggering them consistently when your character decides to moonwalk into the background every time you press forward. The roster was a who's who of mythological irrelevance. There was CY5, a bootleg Cyrax with all the charisma of a fax machine. Vala, who looked like someone dared the artist to redraw Sonya Blade from memory while on a roller coaster. An Exor, the final boss, who might have been an alien, a cyborg, or possibly just the internal representation of Midway's declining standards. Critics hated it, players ignored it, and internally, even the Mortal Kombat team kept their distance. This was an entirely separate crew, working in parallel, trying to cobble together a 3D fighter using modified Cruising USA arcade hardware, and a lot of crossed fingers. But here's the thing, as much as War Gods failed, it was necessary. It was the training wheels, the cautionary tale. It crawled so Mortal Kombat 4 could also crawl, but this time in a straightish line with slightly fewer seizures. Arcades were dying, and into this commercial graveyard swaggered Mortal Kombat 4, blissfully unaware that this platform of choice, namely the arcade cabinet, was now about as viable as launching a new VHS retail chain. Yes, while everyone else was busy playing Tekken 3 in their bedrooms or sobbing into Final Fantasy VII, Midway decided it was a great time to release their most expensive arcade game of all time. That's right, a single Mortal Kombat 4 machine cost around $3,000. A crazy amount of money for the time, especially when it was already tight in arcades. But Midway had a plan, a cunning one. They built Mortal Kombat 4 on their brand new Zeus arcade board, a name that sounds powerful until you realise it was getting bodied by Sony's PlayStation in every conceivable metric except polygon boasting. The Zeus hardware was Midway's shiny new toy, an in-house 3D powerhouse allegedly capable of over 1 million polygons per second, which sounds impressive until you realise it was mostly used to produce characters that look like they've been sculpted out of wet cardboard. To give credit where it's due, this was the Mortal Kombat team's first real stab at proper 3D. Gone were the digitised actors of yesteryear, replaced with fully polygonal fighters. Unfortunately, this meant the team had to completely relearn how to make a video game, except now they were doing it while strapped to a roller coaster powered by a VCR and a curse. Zeus came equipped with exotic wonders like Wave Ram, which sounds like something a Bond villain would use to destroy a city, but in practice, mostly caused memory bottlenecks and spectacularly jittery animations. Every character model used up to 3,000 polygons, an impressive figure at the time, if you ignore the fact that Tekken 2 had already made this kind of thing look effortless. But the real fun began behind the scenes. See, Zeus was designed for parallel processing, great in theory if your team weren't also trying to bolt motion capture onto hand-drawn animations, argue about why Scorpion's head looked like a rock, and reuse half their assets just to make the whole thing fit on EEPROM chips. That's right, EEPROMs in 1997. Because when your competition is loading off discs, you obviously want to use something that makes cassette tapes look cutting edge. Thanks to those chips, loading times were inconsistent, animation frames got cold, and developers had to reuse effects like Shinnok's bone attacks, which, fun fact, were just Quan Chi's skull with a different label stuck on. It's like if Pepsi tried to rebrand itself as New Coke by drawing a frowny face on the can. Worst of all, the Zeus board couldn't even deliver its full potential during gameplay. Yes, it could technically render complex arenas and dramatic camera angles, but only if you didn't mind texture warping, frame rate drops, and what can only be described as the world's first fully interactive tech demo for motion sickness. It was, in short, a classic case of ambition colliding with reality. Zeus was powerful on paper, but in practice it exposed every crack in Midway's pipeline. The game chugged, animations were stiff, fatalities looked like someone taped over an autopsy video of a PS1 FMV, and yet despite all of this, Midway pressed on, because they weren't just making a game, they were laying down a new path, a jagged, glitchy, polygon-filled path, lined with texture seams and dashed dreams. What a time to be alive. Meanwhile, home consoles were taking over everything. The PlayStation had sold over 3 million units worldwide by just 1995, and players were quickly realising they didn't have to trudge into town and beg their mum for 50p just to get curb stomped by a sweaty stranger in a backwards cap. They could just do it from the comfort of their living room instead. So, with arcades dying, console tech accelerating, and the fighting game genre creaking under the weight of saturation, Midway chose this moment to drop their most ambitious arcade game yet. Ridiculous really, it would have been like debuting a new steam-powered bicycle the year after the car was invented. Charming, but ultimately doomed. But that didn't mean the team didn't at least try to make the game stand out. After all, Mortal Kombat 4 wasn't just trying to look different, it wanted to feel different. Gone were the colourful gimmicks of Mortal Kombat 3. No more babalities, friendships or animalities. Because why would a series known for making people explode into 12 rib cages want to be fun, right? Yes, Mortal Kombat 4 was Midway's very serious phase. The eyeliner years, the gritty reboot before gritty reboots were fashionable. The developers decided that instead of transforming into a penguin or slapping someone into a bloody pulp, which, let's be honest, is peak art, players should instead enjoy grime, somber violence in dull stone arenas, accompanied by music that sounded like Gregorian monks being slowly digested. Animalities were the first to get the chop. All the absurd little nuggets of charm that told you Mortal Kombat didn't take itself too seriously were removed, all scrapped in favour of mature storytelling. The new aesthetic, gloomy, muddy, and determined to be taken seriously. As for the music, composer Dan Forden ditched the catchy techno riffs in favour of moody ambience and tribal drums. It was atmospheric, sure, but also about as fun as being stuck in a lift with a metronome and the ghost of Trent Reznor. Even the characters got caught in the tonal crossfire. The problem wasn't that Mortal Kombat 4 tried to be darker, it's that it confused darkness with dullness. There's a fine line between brooding atmosphere and a wet cardboard box, and Mortal Kombat 4 sprinted straight through it, weapon in hand. Still, credit where it's due, the devs had a vision. They wanted Mortal Kombat to be more than a blood circus. They wanted mythos, gravitas, consequence. Unfortunately, what they ended up with was Shinnok, a final boss who looked and sounded like someone trying to be intimidating after being told off at a PTA meeting. While Mortal Kombat 4's tonal pivot wasn't a total disaster, it just came at the cost of everything that made Mortal Kombat fun. And in trying to make the series grow up, they accidentally made it forget who it was. However, this title must have some redeeming features, right? If there was one big gimmick Mortal Kombat 4 brought to the blood-soaked table, it was this. Weapons. Yes, each combatant could now summon a big stick, axe or knife from hammer spaces and start swinging like a drunk medieval cosplayer at a LARP convention. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? Well, temper that excitement, because in practice, Mortal Kombat 4's weapon system was less strategic depth and more press 2 buttons and hope nobody breathes on you. Every character had a signature weapon they could whip out mid-fight using a specific input, which was fun until you realised that weapons could be dropped and anyone could pick them up. So now Scorpion's undead ninja blade could end up in Sonya's hands, and suddenly the whole thing felt less like Mortal Kombat and more like a future Super Smash Bros. Game, with none of the polish or self-awareness. Even better, the weapons were slow, sluggish, glitchy. Swinging one felt like trying to row a canoe through jelly. Some of them did great damage, assuming you landed a hit and didn't get juggled into the Shadow Realm mid-swing. But this wasn't the only bold system tweak. No, Midway had also brought over the dialer combo system from Mortal Kombat 3, but with one beautiful, hilarious change. Nearly every character now shared the same combo string. That's right, why bother designing unique movesets when you can just copy and paste? Truly, we were living in the future. And because Mortal Kombat 3 had been plagued with infinite combo nonsense, Mortal Kombat 4 introduced the maximum damage cap, a handy little failsafe that forcibly ended your combo if it did too much damage. Which in fairness sounds smart, but in practice it just made the already clunky combat feel like it had an off switch and robbed the combo system of any flow. You get halfway through a juggle, hit the limit, and suddenly your opponents drop to the floor like they've been bored in submission. As for balance, well, if you're hoping for a finely tuned tournament grade fighter, I regret to inform you, this was more Mortal Kombat lottery. Characters like Reptile were reduced to borderline uselessness, his special moves had the startup of a fax machine and the recovery of a Victorian widow. It's not a balanced game, it's a fever dream of numbers, delays and untested hitboxes. In short, the combat of Mortal Kombat 4 tried to be modern, tactical and flashy, but instead of revolutionising the formula, it strapped some knives to it, tripped over a sidestep and landed flat on its face. Still, at least there was gore, lots of gore, even if half of it came with the frame rate of a PowerPoint presentation. So it's got that going for it. Then again, Mortal Kombat, when compared to other fighting game franchises, has never really been about being the most polished or competitive fighter. It's about spectacle and the ridiculous characters. So, what about those? Mortal Kombat 4's roster is the digital equivalent of rummaging through a charity shop bin, labelled Ninja Gods and all sorted failures. On paper it looks promising. Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Raiden. All of the fan favourites were lovingly recreated as chunky polygons with the facial expressions of taxidermied mannequins. But then you got the newcomers, and things took a turn. Say hello to Fujin, the wind god, who looks like a washed-up roadie from a Korn tribute band. Then there's Jarek, who's quite literally Diet Kano, complete with laser eye discount and none of the charm. And of course Tanya, a character whose only real crime is being less memorable than the pause button. To Midway's credit, squeezing these models into their shiny new 3D framework was no small feat. Each fighter was constructed from around 3,000 polygons, which at the time was considered cutting edge. Unfortunately, that cutting edge was often used to slash through your suspension of disbelief, especially when characters blinked like possessed ventriloquist dolls, or move like they just discovered knees. But the biggest offender? The final boss, Shinnok, who we mentioned earlier. Yes, Mortal Kombat 4 gave us its own big bad, and he was without question one of the least intimidating final bosses in fighting game history. This wasn't a towering monster like Goro, or a steroidal tyrant like Shao Kahn. No, this was a man who looked like a regional theatre Dracula playing a tax inspector in a leather coat. Ed Boon himself later admitted that making Shinnok the boss was a mistake. You don't say. He wasn't menacing, he wasn't memorable, his voice sounded like he was trying to order soup through a kazoo. Worse still, many of the characters' endings, particularly in the home version, came in the form of low-budget cutscenes, animated with all the passion of a GCSE media project. It's a shame really, Mortal Kombat had always been about big personalities and unforgettable villains, but Mortal Kombat 4, in its desperate dash to join the 3D era, delivered a cast that was somehow less charismatic with voice acting and motion than they were as 2D sprites grunting like pigs in a blender. After scraping the arcade's dignity into a bin, Mortal Kombat 4 then leapt gleefully into the home console space, flinging itself onto every platform that hadn't already begged for mercy. PlayStation, of course. Nintendo 64, why not? PC, sure, let's ruin that too. Game Boy Color, don't worry, we'll get to that. First, the headline act, the PlayStation version. Developed by Eurocom, this was a mostly faithful adaptation of the arcade original, which is both a compliment and an insult. Visually, it was a downgrade, the textures were muddier, the frame rate was choppier, and load times were so frequent they may as well have been advertised as a feature. But hey, it had full motion cutscenes, that means it was cinematic, right? Well, sort of. The FMVs were grainy, awkwardly directed, and voiced with the kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for budget audiobook erotica, but at least you could see something. Still, the Nintendo 64 version did one thing better. It ran at a smoother 60 frames per second. That means gameplay was technically faster and more responsive, assuming you could stomach the visuals, which looked like a Doom mod starring wax figures. Then there was the PC version, which let players plug Mortal Kombat 4 into their shiny beige towers and experience all the stuttering glory their graphics cards could handle. And the less said about the Game Boy Color port, the better. That abomination barely qualified as a fighting game. 2 buttons, no blood, characters that looked like they'd been drawn from memory by a tired accountant. It was Mortal Kombat in name only, like if someone printed the script of Saw on a tea towel and called it horror. But wait, Midway wasn't done yet. Enter Mortal Kombat Gold. This version added new characters like Katana, Baraka and Kung Lao, along with new stages. So far so good, except once again the execution was like trying to eat soup with a rake. Critics tore it apart for its jagged graphics, sluggish controls and general lack of polish, especially when Soul Calibur was sitting right there on the same system looking like it came from the future. Put simply, no matter which version you picked, you were trading one flavour of disappointment for another. Mortal Kombat 4's journey to home consoles was ambitious, yes, but it was also an ambitious mess. At launch, Mortal Kombat 4 managed that rare and elusive gaming feat. It pleased absolutely no one in a consistent way. Critics were all over the place. Some applauded its efforts to modernise the franchise, while others treated it like Midway had handed them a polygonal dead rat and asked for a round of applause. Mainstream outlets, perhaps still blinded by brand loyalty, gave the game middling to positive reviews. A bold leap into 3D, they cried. New gameplay innovations, they cheered. Finally, weapons, they squealed. Presumably before being smacked unconscious by one in the game. And yes, there was a certain excitement about seeing Mortal Kombat in 3 dimensions for the first time, even if those dimensions came covered in jagged textures and jank. But the cracks began to show, almost immediately. Electronic Gaming Monthly famously declared it the worst Mortal Kombat game ever made. Others bemoaned the stilted animations, repetitive combos, and blocky character models that aged faster than a banana in a sauna. And yet, despite the complaints, it sold. Oh, did it sell. Thanks to aggressive marketing and the sheer gravitational pull of Mortal Kombat's brand in the 90s, Mortal Kombat 4 moved units like a champ. It didn't matter that the combat felt like shadow boxing inside a tumble dryer. The fans came anyway. Coin purses clutched tightly, hoping desperately that this one would finally be the one. Retrospectively, however, Mortal Kombat 4's legacy had become a battlefield. Some insist it's criminally underrated. They talk about the darker tone, the atmospheric music, the ambition. Others, let's call them sane. They see Mortal Kombat 4 for what it was. A deeply compromised title stuck in a generational no man's land. Too clunky for the new age, too limited for the old. A relic of a franchise trying to have its brutality and bash it too. Still, as far as misunderstood failures go, Mortal Kombat 4 is fascinating. It's not a game without merit, it's just one where every good idea seems to be immediately undercut by another baffling decision. A swing and miss, a fatality where the spine comes out, but so does the credibility. This was the game that marked the end of Mortal Kombat's arcade era. The last time players would crowd around a machine in a dingy shopping centre praying the joystick wasn't sticky from cola, or something worse. Mortal Kombat 4 was the series' final coin-op outing before everything went fully domestic, leaving behind the glorious communal violence of the 90s for the warm, lonely embrace of the home console. And with that departure came another funeral, the death of digitised actors. Gone were the gloriously cheesy, real-life martial artists in spray-painted costumes, replaced now by jagged 3D models. It was the end of Mortal Kombat's original visual identity, ripped out like a spine and thrown into the pit of early 3D experimentation. But for all its faults, Mortal Kombat 4 laid the groundwork for the future. Without it, there would be no Deadly Alliance, no Deception. It was a stepping stone made of cracked concrete and broken dreams, but a stepping stone nonetheless. It taught Midway valuable lessons like maybe don't reuse your boss's skull projectile for another character. Maybe don't replace your towering final boss with someone who looks like a DJ at a vampire bar. And maybe, just maybe, don't release 4 ports of the same game when none of them are particularly good. Mortal Kombat 4 wasn't the graceful evolution Mortal Kombat needed. It was the messy puberty it couldn't avoid. A time of gangly limbs, embarrassing decisions, and unfortunate haircuts. Yes, it was flawed, it was janky, it was weird, but it survived. And in the blood-slicked world of Mortal Kombat, that alone earned you a place in the temple. So Mortal Kombat 4, was it a disaster? Yes. Was it innovative? Also yes. Was it ugly, weirdly balanced technically, unstable, and creatively confused? Absolutely. And yet somehow it mattered. It's easy to mock Mortal Kombat 4, in fact it's been tremendously easy, thank you. But it took risks, it tried new things, it dared to be something else, darker, 3D'er, and disastrously ambitious. And yes, it fell flat in the process, but at least it fell forward. So if you've ever looked at Mortal Kombat 4 and thought, what on earth were they thinking? The answer is simple, they were thinking about the future. They just accidentally built it out of jank, triangles, and the broken dreams of thousands of arcade operators. But hey, sometimes you've got to crawl through the polygonal muck just to find out what a next-gen fatality shouldn't look like. Don't forget that Capcom's dialed it up to 11 with Capcom Fighting Collection 2. 8 retro bangers in one juicy bundle which you can get 25% off right now using my link below. Not enough? Try 74% off of Street Fighter 6 with Season 1 and 2 passes sliced in half, or grab Fatal Fury City of the Wolves and Expedition 33, both at 43% off. There's loads more deals down there too, so hit the link, grab a bargain, and cheerio.